Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're from around the world. My name is Vivian Bird, and I am on the Standing Committee of Environment, Sustainability, and Library Section, or ENSULIB. And I am a STEM librarian and program lead for the Participatory Science and Full STEAM Ahead initiative at the Los Angeles Public Library in California, USA. And so, welcome to this webinar provided by ENSULIB. Again, it's IFLA's Environmental, Sustainability, and Library section. And our webinar today is Sea Library Skillshare, Envelopes, and Labeling class. This webinar explores practical ways communities can package, label, share seeds. We will review real examples gathered from communities and contributing your own tips and experiment with tools like auto seed wrapper. Participants, you are all invited to start and create your own auto seed wrapper and share envelope design, labeling methods, thinking about membership, donation forms, and strategies that support seed sharing. And before we get started, just a quick background information about ENSULIB. So ENSULIB's aim is to encourage all librarians of all types to inspire their communities into more environmentally sustainable ways of action by providing materials on green librarianship, give voice projects worldwide. ENSULIB offers many projects and activities from webinars like the one we have today and we also have recordings of others, events and conference sessions. But also there are many resources we have compiled and created online. We also translate them into many different languages, such as Green Library Definition Checklist, posters, tools. And we just wrap up a book project called Libraries Driving Education for Sustainable Development. And there's many other things, so definitely check out our website. We manage IFLA's annual Green Library Award. Many of these projects we ask for volunteers to assist. So please reach out to us if you're interested to be part of the working group. You can also join us our list to receive our newsletters that comes out every 6 months and also offer to share your stories by submitting one. So this event is being recorded, except for the breakout rooms if we're using it, and also we also record chats. The video will be posted on YouTube, and the link will be posted on ENSULIB's webpage and on Facebook. The chat and the Q&A proceeding will not be recorded or published. Microphones have been muted for this event. If you have any comments or questions, we invite you to use the chat, or you can also use the Q&A button if you have it at the bottom of your menu bar. And also the Q&A session will follow after the presentation. So please type in your question there. If you have any questions regarding privacy, please, you can email the email that we share on the slide. And also the talk is GDPR compliant. And if you have, you want more details about IFLA and zoo privacy policies, you see the link on the slide. And now I am pleased to introduce our speaker, Rebecca Newburn, who has returned again to share a deeper dive on how to best set up Sea Library program. This time, we will be talking about proper labeling, packaging, and envelope, and more. Just give you a little bit info about Rebecca. She is a prominent advocate for sea conservation and community engagement, have played a pivotal role in the growing and popularization of sea libraries. She is co-founders of the Richmond Groves Sea Landing Library and the founder of Sea Library Network. Rebecca has been instrumental in creating a resilient and replicable models for sea libraries across the globe. Through her initiative, she's championing the importance of preserving plant biodiversity, promoting sustainable agricultural practices, and fostering community collaboration. Now we are going to hand the floor to Rebecca.
She's also a middle school science teacher who just finished last week. So first off, I am so glad to be here sharing this with you folks. I mean, I am a big fan of libraries and all of the work that you do in communities. And so this is just a little bit about the journey that we took and some of the people we've met along the way and what they're doing in their seed libraries. And it'll show you just a whole wide range of things. And the idea is really just to get some inspiration. And if you have some ideas, also how you might share those so that other people can benefit from the things that you've done along your journey. Okay, let's see if I can get to the very beginning of my slides. Uh-oh. I think I'm all the way there. Is that the beginning? Okay. I got to go back a little bit. So just a little bit about this. I'm going to obviously Vivian gave a little bit of intro, but I'd like to hear a little bit about where you are coming in from, your location, the status of your library, if you are planning on opening, if you're already open, how many years you've been open. It's just kind of helpful to kind of see who's in the house. And then, as she mentioned, we will do at the end questions and answers, but obviously put them in as they come up for you. And as noted, this is going to be recorded, and I will send out a pretty detailed list of these resources. So we'll look at kind of minimum requirements for seed packing, what might be some considerations in terms of options for packing, pros and cons of pre-packing or not, talking about how many seeds might you want to put in a packet, look at lots of examples of ways that you might want to level up, and you might want to do it for all of your packets, but there might be something special in your collection that you want to highlight. So we'll talk about some ways that might look like, or just some maybe next steps if you want to kind of keep moving forward in terms of just supporting people in your community to actually know how to plant them and also save seeds. And then as she mentioned, we'll talk about the auto seed wrapper, which is just an amazing program that if you haven't used it yet, you might want to look at exploring it to help you really support simplifying your process. And then we'll talk a little bit about signage and borrowing and donating procedures. So once again, put the questions in the Q&A and we'll look at those kind of at the end, as well as some other resources. So just a little bit about the seed library that I founded. We started in May 1st. We opened on May Day 2010, where we were in the Richmond Public Library in Richmond, California, that's San Francisco Bay Area, for 15 years. And now the library is being renovated. So we're now in a recreation center for 2 years. We're a 100% self-serve library just because our library staff had actually, the day that I went to go and propose this, they had actually let go of half their library staff. And it was just a really hard time in our community, just financially. And so we're a nonprofit in the public library. So we kind of made it so that we would have no impact on the library staff. So just really thinking about, if you are a librarian and you're doing it by yourself, like how can you make it as easy for yourself as possible? And so these are some of the ideas that we did to make it easy for ourselves. But there's as many ways to do a library as there are communities. And so just know that there's no one right way. You have to think about what's going to work for you in your context with your staffing needs and with your volunteer support and the partnerships you might have in your community. So once again, just talking a little bit about like why we made our decisions, other options that might be available. I kind of based our 100% self-serve on the fact that, one, I'm professionally a middle school science teacher. I needed to have something that was going to be doable for me, regardless of the ups and downs of life and the busyness of my paid job. And I also really was looking at the model that we based ours on, which is the Berkeley Ecology Center. And they had been going for, I think, 10 years before we were. And so I like the fact that they were self-serve, and sometimes they had lots in their collection and sometimes it was pretty, small, but the fact is that it was able to sustain itself. And for me, having that long time sustainability trajectory, even though it might be blooming sometimes and smaller sometimes, was important. So as I said, we're 100% self-serve. In other words, we don't pre-pack, but I'll talk about the pre-packing and that as an option as well. We're open when the library is open. In this case, now we're open when the rec center is open. People take out larger takeout envelopes and put it in their own envelopes. And so we really needed to educate people about proper quantities. So if you do have a self-serve piece, letting people know, or even if it's take pre-packed envelopes, letting people know what's appropriate quantities is going to be part of the process. So we first started with a paper template. We're a very low budget, high impact organization. So you can see we had this rubber stamp that we got made from a local stamp maker. And this is what our original one kind of looked like. It had the common name, the scientific name, which isn't always that important because tomatoes are just tomatoes. However, if you're looking at natives or you're looking at squash, where there's several different species of squash, then sometimes the scientific name will become more important. The variety, the seed source, the location of the harvest. The reason we have location of harvest is in our area, we have a lot of microclimates. So from where I live to 10 minutes away in the hills, it can be a 20-degree Fahrenheit difference. And so that was important for us to note. And then also how easy or hard is it to save the seeds and have them come out reliably. So this was kind of where we started with our envelopes and labeling. And then I became kind of a queen of stamps. I mean, that was our first stamp. And then we got just this stamp made where we could just put on envelopes, and just so that people, if they were borrowing envelopes or if they were borrowing seeds, they would know, or that they could go to our website for information on planting instructions. We had one made about, things were toxic. Not that that's typically an issue in our vegetable collection, but the one I was most concerned about was sweet peas, which in English is very mislabeled. Sweet peas are a flower, but it's actually not edible. And then we have a diverse mix stamp. So one of the things is a lot of people are afraid to return seeds because they're afraid they're not going to be okay in terms of they're not going to come out as labeled. And then there's going to be some things that are just we understand in where we live, and just things like brassicas, broccoli, and all that are very likely to cross, as are things like sunflowers. So we accept sunflowers, we accept things like broccoli, but we just label them as diverse so that people who borrow those seeds, if they're locally grown, understand that they're maybe not going to get what it said on the label. And then we do have some things that might be rare or that are specific to our community. We've come across a couple of seed savers that have been stewarding seeds from their family or from their culture. And so just being able to stamp that this is rare, please save seed. It's not to say that people can't borrow it, but just if people had a choice between two different beans and one was rare and one wasn't, and they weren't planning on saving it, they might be more geared towards that more common variety. So those are just some of the stamps that we use to kind of help highlight some of the information that you could easily make and put on your own envelopes. So during the winter, so we had everything in envelopes. And then during the winter of 2013, we had what's called a Pineapple Express. And so Pineapple Express is like day after day after day of just constant raining. And so people weren't going into the library to borrow seeds. And we had some unexpected visitors. As you can see from the picture, it was a bunch of mice. I mean, they were already in the library to say, but they found the collection and they destroyed everything. They ate everything in the collection except for one squash, which to this day, I'm still curious about why they would not touch that one particular squash. So at that point, we decided to move to jars. So once again, you might be in your collection all envelopes. We went to actual jars at that point. And we did it for a couple of reasons. One, we could see how much seed was in the collection, how much seed was available still. It also gives people, in a self-serve system, a very clear indication that you're not taking the whole thing. Because I think we have a very consumer mentality towards interacting with things, sadly, and even with things as important and as community-based as seed, that people are used to just getting a whole packet. And if you have a jar, it's very clear that you're not taking the whole jar, that you're taking from it. So you can see on this jar, this is kind of where we started from. We would have on the top of the jar the the information like the common name and the varietal name and the year. So we would know if this is time to take out of the collection or not. And I know a lot of libraries run out of seed, and that's not the concern they have at this point. I'm wishing that for you. Um, but we have a 100% locally grown collection, and so we grow a lot of seed, and so we do actually have on occasions need to kind of move things out. And sometimes people donate older seed, and so that's also an indication, just letting us know when to keep it and when it needs to be tossed. And then we have on the jar as well, just a little information about one seed equals one plant. Take what you intend to grow. So that's just kind of a way to let people know, there's multiple ways that you want to give people information about how much to take, whether it's packets that are already pre-done, or if they're self-serving, what is an appropriate quantity. So that's a little bit about our journey. And now we're going to look at some of the other folks' labels and signage. But before we do that, I want to include a little discussion about what happened in 2014. And this is more focused towards people in the United States, but I think that we can all benefit from this. So in 2014, we had another issue to deal with. And spoiler alert, it is totally fine and legal to save seeds in the United States and share them in libraries and seed libraries. You can so the main idea was to give just a brief history. In 2014, a library in the state of Pennsylvania in the United States was told its seed library was considered a commercial seed distributor. And with the support of the Sustainable Economies Law Center, the Seed Library Network spent the next 2 years working with United States state seed control officials and seed industry representatives to update the recommended uniform state seed law that goes out to all the states in the United States. And basically what we came up with was that sharing seeds in a seed library is not commercial. And we were able to continue to do what we've been doing for 10,000 years in community, which is saving and sharing seeds. The one caveat I would say is that it is useful, whether you're in the United States or another place, to have signage that says the seed library may not meet germination or varietal purity standards. So that's kind of a nice, helpful thing to do. So the legality of it is in the United States, and probably this is probably good recommendation regardless, which is you can encourage people to return seeds, but don't require them to do it. So once you require someone to return seeds, you get into more of a contractual agreement. In the United States, that puts you in a little bit of a fuzzy zone. So have a seed about the local seed quality. Once again, it could be as simple as I said, just seeds from the library don't meet germination or varietal purity standards. And then also say something about that you don't accept GMO seeds or you don't accept patented varieties. In the United States, that would be labeled PVPs. And then it's also good to state the date the seeds were donated or harvested. And so that just gives people an understanding of how likely the seeds are to be viable if they're older or not. And we do have signage if you want to print out what we have in the Richmond Grows about just the seed quality, but just a simple note about that they're not up to commercial standards is a good place to start. So I'm just kind of curious if people pack their own seeds or if you allow self-serve, and if you've experimented with which ones, like, if it worked for you or not. So I'd be just kind of curious to hear where people are in terms of their journey about seed saving and sharing in libraries. Pack or no pack? Okay, so um okay, so we pack some. Yeah, so a lot of people pack. So it's very common to pack. And once again, that's a totally viable, great way to do it. And we'll talk about some of the pros. So just kind of go into some of the pros and cons. So pre-packed, you get to control the seed, the quantity of the seed. So it will help you extend it more, because all it takes is one person to be like, oh, I'm going to take, 50 zucchini seeds. And that was enough for, many families. a lot of people use packing parties. And so you can think about who might be some of those partners that might help you pack seeds as opposed to being staff time. Or staff might supervise it, get it going, but that can actually be done by other people in your community. You can take it to a senior center. You can get high schoolers or college students that need community service. You can work with a local garden club to get those packing parties done. And the other thing about pre-packing is you really get all the critical information that you want on the seed packets. Whereas if you let people self-serve and they're just taking seeds out and they have to label it themselves, they might just write lettuce and they might not write that it's a particular variety or that it's this old. And so if they aren't successful, they can't really say, oh, well, the seed was actually 5 years old. That's probably why it didn't germinate. But it does, one of the downsides is it does take more, volunteer and staff time and coordination. So self-serve envelopes, if you, once again, you have just envelopes that people can take from, it's easier to manage. But once again, people may take more seeds and you might run out of supplies quicker. People might not write all the information. As I said, we're almost 100% jars in our collection. It's easier to manage the rodent issue, as I mentioned. And then also I just have jars in my house and I can just easily restock. So that's kind of a nice piece about having jars. But if people weren't really mindful and we didn't have a lot to restock, we could easily obviously go through a lot of seed quickly. So just kind of curious in terms of your packing management tips, like what are you doing in your library? Because it seems like a lot of people pre-package. How are you managing that so we can kind of learn from each other in this process? And just so you know, we also have a forum that you can participate in. So it's a forum that I'll have it on the slideshow, where if you have questions or you have tips that you want to share or you're excited about some success that you had, self-serve jars are also quite messy. Yeah, I can see that. I should put that in there as the list of things to note. Okay, so some people have a hybrid now of jars and packs. Yeah. Okay. So if you're doing jars, once again, you don't need to be investing a lot of money in stuff. We use a lot of, in our seed library, we use a lot of spice jars. We have little ice cream kind of like jars that are clear that you can use, baby food jars if those are still a thing, in glass. Okay, let's see. Paid to have envelopes packed. Okay, the first year we packed and it took a lot of time after we paid to have the envelopes packed. Oh, nice, interesting. Okay. Yeah, so you can also just think about reusing stuff. You can see here we've got someone used little micro centrifuge tubes. And then another one. Yeah, so you can see how they kind of had that set. Little, jars, for example, the little, pretty much anything you can work on. The main thing is you need to figure out what's going to work with the size of your shelves or the size of your drawers. I think a lot of seed libraries, at least in the United States, have repurposed the card catalogs, which are not a very conducive size to jars. So spice jars tend to work in there. So that's just something to kind of think about. And we just put out a call for spice jars and we just get tons of them over time. So sourcing envelopes. So this is another thing of like, where are you getting your envelopes from? So you can kind of put that in the chat so that other people can see where it might be some places to look. And it's obviously going to be very space and place specific in terms of what you like. I tend to like, we have these larger ones for beans and things like fava beans and corn. And then we've got smaller ones for pretty much everything else, lettuce, well, the brassicas, flowers, but also just kind of knowing where might be some sources to get them is a helpful place to kind of start thinking about it and look around because the price difference can be significant. So these are just some places, and these are more from a US specific, but if you have other places, these are some of the like online places that people have gotten stuff from. You can go to a local stationery store, but that might be a little bit more expensive. But at the same point, you're supporting a local business. You might talk with them and seeing if you can get like a deal, if they're going to buy it, if they understand the purpose and who they're getting it from. So you might be able to use their discount or something. This seed library here used kind of standard mailing labels. So they had kind of this kind of I don't know what the material is, but that kind of glossy wax paper type of envelopes. And then they had mailing envelopes, and they have a 100% their whole collection in Pima County. This is Pima County, Arizona. You can go to their website, and they've have their whole collection. First off, they started with 2 seed libraries. They now have, I think, 20 seed libraries. I think they're planning on having it in all of their branches. And it's part of their card catalog system. So you can go onto their computer and you can do, just like you could do a book interlibrary loan, you can also do an interseed library loan. So if you see the seeds in a different branch, you can request them through their card catalog system, and everything's barcoded, and it will get sent to your branch. And once again, you don't need to return it. So they have to have in their system a way to kind of zero out any fines because people aren't returning them. But that's kind of like, once again, one edge, a very well-resourced um, seed library that has a lot of staff support. And they have a pretty high return rate, I think about 35%. But they're also in a desert climate. So that might be part, and they, with a very strong food tradition. So I think between having a very strong food culture and seed saving tradition and a lot of heritage seeds and an extreme climate, that's kind of all played into having a pretty high return rate for their seeds. And then some people have gone to trying to get biodegradable bags. The plastic bags tend to be cheaper, but then you get into that whole like not really sustainable piece. We spend a little bit more money to get the paper ones just because that's something that we value. The biodegradable ones, you'd really have to check. I would really check on anything that says biodegradable to see that if your collection service actually takes that in their green waste, because a lot of them take longer to compost than your municipal takes to do it, and so they're actually considered contaminant. So I would look into that before actually investing in something that's labeled as biodegradable. So the main thing I would say with seed, like, it's really just label, label, label. So with your envelopes, I mean, this whole thing is about just getting to the point of label, label, label. As I talked about, you can handwrite, you can rubber stamp. During the pandemic, we moved to this little image down on the left-hand side that basically we passed out 20,000 seed packets the first year of the pandemic. So we were in just hyper, distribution mode. And so this made it really easy for us to just pass out seeds to a volunteer, and they just stamp a gabillion of them. You can do printable stickers. Obviously, that becomes a little bit more expensive. So you can see a couple of examples of that. We just do paper, and we put ours in a jar, and so people take the paper label outside of the jar, and then they can stick it in, so they have everything that they need. But as I said, there's no one way to do it. If you have the money to do stickers, and you can, obviously that makes it, one less step for your patrons to do. So let's look at what things might go on those labels. So as a minimum requirement, so once again, another choice is to put on the envelopes, and so there's a bunch of different ways you can go with it. So we're going to kind of look at just kind of like minimum, what's useful, and then how might you level up your seed. And once again, you might not do it for your whole collection, but there might be some specific things that you want to kind of highlight. You might have a specific thing that's important to your community, and you really want to make sure that they understand the importance of it. And so for a certain part of your collection, you might do some extra add-ons to your envelopes. So minimum requirement would be the common name, for example, tomatoes, the variety, Brandywine or Stupus, the year it was harvested, so we know how long the seed might be viable for, and the grower. And the reason you want to get the grower information, even if it's like first name, like with an initial, is just so that if, for example, with squash, if just some random person donates squash to our collection, we will probably mark it as diverse mix. However, if my friend Gudrun donates it, I know she knows how to hand pollinate properly. And so that's part of the reason is if you don't know the grower, you might be more likely to label it as a diverse mix if you don't know who that person is. And it's a species that tends to cross-pollinate. Useful. Some other things that might be helpful to add to your envelopes is how long does it take to grow? So like, is this a 45-day thing or does this take 90 days to grow? You might want to also highlight the uses of that. Like, is this a shelling bean or a soup bean or a dry bean? Those are really different things. Is this a tomato that's good for dehydrating, or is this more of a slicer that you would put on a sandwich? What's the growth habitat? Are you getting a little bush bean like this, or is it going to be, you know, 2 or 3 meters long? So you want to be thinking about communicating that so that people aren't surprised when they plant it. So being able to have that information on the packet is really great to be able to offer. Descriptions a little bit more, maybe planting instructions, the scientific name that's going to be especially important for things like your squashes, which have multiple species. Some of the beans are multiple species, and then natives in your area. And you might also want to brand your information, have a website where they can either go to your website or maybe some other website for additional information. So those are just some kind of next steps that you might want to think about. Leveling up would really be, how do you include seed saving information? It could be just starting with, is it easy to save or difficult to save? So for example, things that are easy to save are peas, beans, lettuce, and beans, because they're extremely self-pollinating. So they tend to be pollinated and fertilized before they even open up. And so there's very little pollen coming in from other plants, other varieties. So they tend to come out true to what we say, true to type, or as labeled, or as the parent was. So just saying if this is easy or difficult to save, those are all super easy. You might want to have QR codes that take someone to a different site or to some other resource. You can include stories or recipes about how to use that. And then if you really want to go all out, you could do a germination rate. That is a big, heavy lift. So these are just some things that other people have done. So this one seed library in Australia, they came up with this little thermal printer that they use. That's a specialized printer that connects to a computer or phone, and they can just print out their labels. So you can see how much information they've got on it. They've got, it's an annual, the size of the plant, the common name, the scientific name, description, how to sow it and plant it, transplanting information, so that you can see how much information they're able to get on with this. Some other people have used programs like Canva or a circuit design space program to kind of get, more of a, visually appealing thing. So that might be something you're interested in doing. For me, when I first started, I have like files and files. I have folders and folders and folders, and within them files and files of files of all the different varieties that I have grown. So I'm like, I have a whole folder of fava beans and a whole folder of common beans. And because I grow a lot of different varieties. And so for me, over a certain time, that became overwhelming. But if you tend to use the same things over and over again, and it's a fairly small collection, then going and having these, and you might just do something more for the visual. Here's our branding piece about how to get more information. And your seed saving might be another piece, but just it can also get a little bit unmanageable if you have a large collection. So it's something to think about, but it's also really nice when you're able to have something aesthetically appealing like these. And you can see the Binghamton folks. I like how they were saying this is more for donations, but like people were like, is it open pollinated or an heirloom? Is it organic or not? So that kind of is a nice piece to be able to collect. This one here on the left from um, Greenville, South Carolina in the United States. So they have kind of more of a visual piece where they can kind of check when to plant it and the sun requirements and stuff like that. So I would say if you have, especially if you have a community that maybe is really multilingual, something like this might be a really great tool to help them understand, what the requirements are for that particular plant. So that's a really nice piece to be able to provide more access to your community. And then you can see the one on the right, they've added in, this is from a native seed library. And they've included a picture to kind of help people understand what they're going to get from that, as well as, I don't think they put height on this one. No, they didn't. Okay, but there's another one that does that. So if you're growing the same thing year after year, once again, you might want to select a couple things that you want to really kind of level up your packaging on. This is one, the one on the left is one from our seed library, and this was one of my neighbors. She has a Love in the Mist or Nigella that her grandmother gave her, and then it just even as she moved from house to house to house until she was able to buy her own house, this it would show up in her potted plants year after year, and then she finally moved to her own space, and it showed up in her garden, and so now she's got this beautiful white Love in the Mist that turns pink when it gets older. And so I was able to do a voice recording of her talking about her grandmother and her relationship to the grandmother and how this plant just kind of stayed with her, just like the spirit of and the love that she has for her grandmother. So I think sometimes you can do little QR codes that take people to a little interview or maybe to a website where they can learn more information. And then you can see on the right, this is another one. They just did little sticky dots, kind of as I was saying, those peas, beans, tomatoes, and lettuce are super easy and likely to come out as expected. So just putting a little green sticker and having some signage so people know what that means is a way to go. And then here are some just like ideas on leveling up. So this is from a master gardener that was working with a public library to do theirs. So they obviously had, some different skill sets in terms of, the being master gardeners. So they were including on it the number of seeds per package. So that's kind of a helpful thing to do that you might want to include on your packets. But they were also giving a discard date. So if these aren't used by this date, we should probably discard the seeds. They also did germination tests on them so that people had a sense of what the germination rate was. And then also, if they were donated seeds, so like you could see if they were a local donation, they had a little green sticker. I think I really might do that little local donation. Well, we're 100% local donation, but I like that idea of highlighting that this is local, especially as we're thinking about one, creating a community of resilience, commuting a creative abundance, creating a community where our seeds are adapting to a rapidly changing planet, having that local seed or if you have lots of microclimates like we do, also that local piece is really kind of highlights kind of our interconnectedness. And then these two here are both native ones, but you can kind of see what they've done here. So they've had an image, they've got the number of seeds on the packet, the scientific name, the height of the plant, which is really important with natives because it could be a little bush or it could be like 2 meters tall. The specific germination. So for example, some natives need to be cold stratified or they need a little bit of scarification. So like they need the seed nicked before it germinates. What are the sunlight conditions, soil conditions? Like, does it do well in poor soil or drain soil? And then they had a link to a native site so that people could get more information about that particular species if they wanted to learn more. So I really like how these two seed libraries kind of were able to incorporate that information onto their packets. And then this Norris Seed library in Tennessee in the United States, they have an editable word template. So they have their template, you can see it on the left, and then all the stuff in purple is what they type on, and then they can just use that over and over again. Um, and she, the librarian that I talked to, she's like, although a rather intensive process, all the seeds in our catalog are on a Google sheet spreadsheet, so people can actually view what's kind of up to date in theirs. And so once again, you're going to get a link to this slideshow, and you'll be able to kind of, if you want to see that for yourself, you can go and look at what they have on theirs. And once again, we have a massive collection. Like for us, is all 100% volunteers. Like that would not work for us. But if you have a smaller collection and you're also maybe even purchasing seeds and you're wanting to kind of keep more track of stuff, um, that you know, there's a doable way to do that. And so some libraries have binders where the packet labels reside, so that instead of having to kind of redo everything and do all that intensive labeling, you can just go and you can see on the left the our cold climate seed library in British Columbia and Canada. They've just kind of typed everything up, and they have the, you know, all that information there with including pictures. And then at the Birmingham Botanical Garden, they just, you know, have binders and you can just open them up. They do have you can see they have a book there as well. I would say if you can access the Seed Garden as a reference book, it is a phenomenal book. It's put out by Seed Savers Exchange in the United States, and it is a really exceptionally well written and beautifully designed reference book. So this is kind of what I want to talk about, is where we switched and we really dove deep into our packet. So this is the auto seed wrapper. And this is one I gave my mom. So it's got a lot of her writing on it. So it's got, and I'll show some pictures. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about what it is and then I'll show the pictures. But basically it is a spreadsheet. It's a Google spreadsheet, but you could probably use it in any other form, like Excel or whatever. And we have pre-loaded 70 different common species on it. So it has like amaranth. It's got how to plant it, sun requirements, seed saving requirements. And then you could just go and you could see that we offer, you know, 4 different varieties of amaranth. So as the person who made a copy of this, I would just add in, you know, column E, which is the varietal name. I would put the year, so column G, and then column J, which is a description of that particular variety. And so then next year, when I go to plant the Burgundy Amaranth, I just go, I want to print line 4, and now it's 2026. And then it just prints it out and it has multiple formats in terms of sizes that you can use. And so it's just been such a game changer. So here's, for example, like the Copperhead Amaranth, you could do it. And once again, these are US measurements, but we also have some A4 measurements as well. So you could do like 6 on 8.5 by 11, same thing in 6 on A4. And then you've got these smaller version ones as well. We print ours all out on paper, just because we're, like I said, a low budget, high impact organization. But if you had like the sticky labels, you could do that. We are still trying to work on some of the details with the A4 because I don't know necessarily all of the sizes that people use. So if you are interested in that, please like hit us up at the end and let us know, because we want to be able to fine tune this so that it works for everybody. But you could also just use one of those full sticky sheets that doesn't have any dividers, and any of these would work for you. But you can see, it has, you know, we have a large Latino population, so ours are in English and Spanish, or at least the names are, so people know what they're getting. The varietal name, the species name, the year, how many to take. So we have it right on the envelope. But if you were pre-packing or you had a packing party, it has that information for your packers to say, just take a pinch. So that as you're packing people, like they know how much they're going to put in each envelope. A description of the plant, planting instructions, who it was grown by. So this was grown at the middle school that I work at. And then the seed saving information, and then a picture. So once again, the pictures sometimes don't quite scale. Like this one's a little bit bigger. And then this one down here on the side is just puny and not worth it. But it got a lot of information, and it's just about that size. So it's packing in a lot of information, what equivalent to what you would get on a a professional, I should say, not professional, commercial seed packet. And then you can also add your branding or a QR code in that space. And so I'm going to just, let's see. So all of this is available on our website for free. And let's see, additionally, I'm going to just put this in the chat. So I'm going to put in the auto wrapper in the chat right now. So if you just want to make a copy of it while it's still fresh in your brain, by all means do that. And then kind of, so I'm really thinking about like, so we're getting out this, labeling and envelopes. But I think what I really is starting to notice, or maybe I'd noticed it for a while, but just finally getting on it, is I think seed libraries have done a phenomenal job of getting out there. Like people understand that they can borrow seeds. People understand they borrow seeds, they plant them. Some libraries have been a little bit more successful in getting the word out about saving and that you can save them. But I think the process of returning them is a little bit fuzzier. So I think that that's something that we need to work on in our communities is how do we communicate to our patrons how they might return seeds. So what I did this past year was I started working on these zines, and these are available. I think I'm putting in the English version, but if you go to our website, and once again, afterwards, we'll send you all the resources, but we have them in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. And they're also all editable. So if you speak another language, you can take them and then translate them. But the idea is we still have, you can see we've got on the front the common name. And this one is a diverse mix, so it doesn't have a varietal name, the year. And then if you actually cut out the front piece, that actually becomes the return label. So that if people actually return them, they're going to just cut that out and they put their name on it and the town. So we have all the information, the basic information we need, which is the common name, the varietal name, the year it was grown, and then who grew it. So that's kind of the bare minimum. And then on the inside of the zine, this is just like an A4 or an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. We've got the planting instructions. It also says that for spinach, the seed life is 6 years. And we talk about how to save it. So we go into a little bit more depth than's on the seed packet. And then you can't quite see the other side, but behind the stapled envelope, it tells people how to return seeds to the seed library. And so we have a whole thing on our website about how you might want to determine what your return policy is. Are you going to accept just a bag of unprocessed seeds, or do you need people to clean things for you? Oh, here it is. So here's the donating piece. We did this last time. This was our last one, was about donating. So on the ENSULIB thing, they have all the resources. So this was the last class I taught. I forgot it was for you guys. So this talks about the donating procedures and all that. We have all the resources and walks you through how to do that. And great. And then I want to just really highlight that we are so fortunate that we have a very generous community, and all the images and tips and everything that I'm pretty much sharing in this presentation have really come from other people, and we've all benefited from their generosity. So we have on our website at the bottom of most of our pages, this community resources tab. So you'll see these little down at the bottom, these community tips and resources, or add your own resources. So you can go in and pretty much explore what other people have done, or you can add your own things. So I'm just going to give you a link to, because we're focusing on envelopes and labels. So I'm just putting the link to our webpage for envelopes and labels. So you can just see what other people, and you can see some of the things that I've shared today are from that, what people have shared on that. So, but before we get into Q&A, I want to share a little bit about appropriate quantities to put into packets. So this was an infographic we made a little while ago. And so one of the things to think about is the age of the seed. So if the age of the seed is a little bit older, take a little bit more. We do have a seed viability chart on our website that I'll also share with the resources when the recording goes out. You might also obviously adjust how much you put in the envelope based on what you have in stock and the demand. Typically, what we say is if it's larger seeds, 2 to 3 seeds per plant that a normal person, like that an average gardener might grow. So, like a zucchini, maybe they're going to have, 1 to 2 plants. I wouldn't say more than 3 plants, that'd be crazy, but maybe like 2 plants just so there's a higher pollination. So, that would be 2 to 3 times that. So, anywhere from, 4 to 6 seeds. And then we just say if it's small seeds, like a pinch of that. And once again, a little bit extra if it's older seed. We do have the seed viability chart. I'm planning on remaking this to kind of talk a little bit more about genetic diversity in here, but I will put in a link. I just put that in the chat, the seed viability. So you can just kind of see, the brassicas, like broccoli, and those tend to last for 5 years. The Phaseo vulgaris, that's the common bean, that's about 4 years. Fava bean's about 4 years. So this is under our maintaining a library page under annual tasks, if you're interested in figuring out where to find that later. And then kind of lastly, once again, you can also just put it right on your envelopes if you're having anyone do self takeouts. If you're getting a commercial donation, you can just do what we did on the right, which is we just put a little tag and highlight it, take 2 to 3 seeds for every plant you grow, or it's right on the auto wrapper, and we just highlighted it to make sure that people don't take way more than is appropriate. And we also have just signage that people can kind of help just kind of gear in, like lock in, which is like take only what you plan to grow, take 2 to 3 seeds, take a pinch, and then the envelope requirements. So all of these are available for download. Everything we have is pretty much editable. So most of it's on Canva. And we also have the PDFs if you just want to take it or just want to use it for inspiration. So we'll just look at a couple of examples of leveling up. Oh, no, we're done. Okay, so at this point, yeah, just kind of want to go over some of the resources if you want to kind of keep up. Like, for example, right now I'm working on bookmarks, which I'm really excited about, like bookmarks on seed saving. And we'll have those available for download on our website soon. And also, we're going to get a whole bunch printed out. So if you want to just buy them through one of the seed companies we're working with, you can get them pretty much like almost at cost. We're like not doing it for a profit. We just want to get them out there and make it easy for people. And you guys can get the benefit of the discount from bulk purchasing. So we have our newsletter. So our newsletter is going to go out, I think, tomorrow. So if you sign up for Seed Library Network at Substack, that is something that I would recommend doing today. If you're not already on our newsletter, I will put those links in the chat. If you have a seed library and you're open, get yourself on the map so it's easy for you to find other people. Follow us on Instagram at Seed Libraries, and there is our LinkedIn if you want to scan the little code. Great. And then also just recently I made coloring books, so that'll be in our upcoming. I put it in our last Substack, but I just did a little update on that on our newsletter that's coming out tomorrow. So if you are interested in doing a little story time with coloring books with kids, that is something you can do. Awesome. So we got some questions.
We
Okay,
do.
great.
We
Okay.
have one question.
Okay, great.
And I have a question coming from myself.
Sure.
So the first one we have is from Federica. How could you know germination? But also, let me see, what was the question here? Okay, I just lost it. Give me 1 second. But also the variety is determinate, indeterminate if
you'd have to look online and just find that information and just be like, Stupus tomatoes, are they a bush tomato or are they vining tomato? And it'll tell you. Yeah, and usually if you just go to like buy tomato seeds or the particular variety, it'll tell you if it's a determinate or not determinate. And then with the I would say for most seed libraries, they're not going to have a lot of bandwidth to germ test stuff. So I would pretty much use this viability chart to kind of see if it's donated seed, if it's likely to be. And once again, if for example, here's the first one is, oh, Aruca sativa, that's arugula. So if the first one is arugula and it's 5 years and it's, our seed is 4 years old, we might say like take extra, it's a little bit older. I
And
mean, you
then so
can
we have,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh no, I didn't have anything else. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then we have one more question also from Federica is about the duration of this of seeds. It depends also on temperature and humidity, but in library we never have the right conditions. So do you have any suggestion
Oh,
for
I
that?
would say libraries are the perfect conditions. I mean, just like one of the reasons we picked the library is, I mean, one, because we love libraries and and just the dovetailing of the preservation of knowledge and the commons as a place that we wanted to be part of. But the fact that one of the main killers of seeds is humidity. So humidity and heat are the big ones. So if you can, and what's nice about it is also the temperature is more stable. And so I think libraries tend to have a fairly stable temperature. So I think that they tend to not be too hot, not too cold. And so I think if you're concerned about humidity, I mean, I don't know where you're coming in from, but that's where if you are in a place that's really humid, then having things in jars and just putting in those desiccant packets and periodically switching them out is a way to kind of minimize humidity if you're in a really, really, really humid place and your seed library is not modulating for that.
So she just shared some information that she spoke to some botanical expert, and they gave her that information that seeds should stay between 4 to 10 degrees. I'm not sure what's the
That's
next
for
step.
long-term storage. That's for long-term storage. Yeah. I mean, if you're just, I mean, I think for most seed libraries, they're not really worried about long-term storage. They're like, do we have enough to make it through the season?
Awesome. And I have a question because you mentioned about borrowing and returning seeds from patrons. So our library system is actually starting this seed library as well as some of our branches. And one of the biggest concern we have that came up coming up and create this hesitation of taking the return seeds from patron is about the contamination. They're concerning about like the seed-borne diseases and the risk of the seeds not coming back true to type.
Mhm.
So we're just wondering, how do you like, do you do any sort of screening, returning season anyway? Is any way to manage like manage more through like what crops you're accepting or how donors you're training up front?
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely have a space where people put donations in. So I would not have people put their own seeds into the collection. And that's just at least to make sure that as a minimum, you're seeing that they have the common name, the varietal name, the year grown, the year and the grower. So I would say that's a really important thing. I would say in terms of um, like I said, I think it really depends on your community is one thing. Like I'm in a community where there's a lot of food insecurity. And I would say when we first started, our mission was how do we preserve the remaining genetic diversity we have while maintaining food security? And I would say over time, we've gotten a lot more into interest in genetically diverse mixes as a means to respond to climate change, while we still have this mission of preserving, rare and endangered varieties and culturally significant ones, but we also have this other piece of accepting genetically diverse, but we have that label that we use, that little stamp I showed in the very beginning about genetically diverse. So we just stamp things as diverse mix. And some people are just like, I just want to squash. I just want to feed my family. And other people are like, I want this specific variety. And so I think that just having that stamp, there are very few crops that I would say are really, I would say the main crop that I would be concerned about accepting donations, and it's a really like super, super small probability, is zucchini and things that are the C. pepo, because that can actually cross with gourds, and gourds are bitter, but you would know the instant you tasted it that it is not good. But I would say that that species is really the only one that really could be a major health concern. Yeah.
We have one last question
Okay.
from Sanjaya from India.
Okay.
How the seeds are classified? Like, is there any specific classification scheme used like
It's
or
it's going
in
to
other
really
libraries?
it's going to really vary based on the size of your collection. So we have three large cabinets, and so we have, flowers. We have a whole cabinet of flowers. We have whole cabinets on um, herbs, and that's A, B, C, D, E. And then we have our vegetables, which is mostly by family level. And so it would really depend. Some people just group it by flowers and um, vegetables, and other people just have it alphabetical. And so it's going to really vary. And I think once you start getting into um, multilingual communities, when you start getting it alphabetical, then you have to have some signage to help people translate from language to language, so they know how to find it, or visual to know that, oh, there's my cucumbers are there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I
Oh,
think
pleasure.
this is a really active and interactive webinar. We have so many comments and everyone is sharing their experience and their insights on how they're doing what they're doing with their C library.
Oh,
So
I didn't put it here, but join, if you go to if you go to our website, clibrarynetwork.org, and you scroll down a little bit, join the Upbeat forum. And that's a place for you to like ask questions and just tap into just the brilliance, as well as just like, I'm doing something really cool and I want to get it out there. It's such a great way to kind of connect. Yeah.
yeah, I went ahead and went to your website and I pulled that link, so I share it onto the chat.
Okay, great.
So all the URLs, any links that we share on the chat in the chat, we will make sure you pull it out, and then we'll share that along with the slide deck after the webinar, after we wrap up everything and cleaned up
Great.
the things a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm going to end this session with a really wonderful comment coming from Caroline. Rebecca Newburn is always such an interesting, competent presenter, and I know I love this webinar, and I do. So thank you for that lovely comment, and we're really grateful for Rebecca joining us again today. We will have more webinars coming up, and so just stay tuned and check out our ENSULIB website frequently as you can, or follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. All right, thank you all so much for joining us.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
Good seeing you. Bye.
Bye.